The Sittaford Mystery Movie Summary in English. Let's begin. Sittaford is a tiny village on the fringe of Dartmoor. Mrs. Willett and her daughter Violet are the newly installed tenants of Sittaford House, a residence owned by Trevelyan, a retired Navy captain. They invite 4 people to tea on Friday afternoon: Captain Trevelyan's long-standing friend, Major Burnaby, Mr. Rycroft, Mr. Ronnie Garfield, and Mr. Duke. At the suggestion of Mr. Garfield, the 6 of them decide to play a game of table turning. During this séance, at 5:25 p.m., a spirit announces that Captain Trevelyan has just been murdered. Concerned for the captain's safety in Exampton, Major Burnaby says that he intends to walk the 6 miles, 9.7 kilometers, there. There is a thick layer of snow on the ground, and further heavy snowfall is forecast for later that evening. There is no telephone in Sittaford, and cars cannot maneuver in these conditions. 2.5 hours later, just before 8 p.m., in the middle of a blizzard, Major Burnaby is trudging up the path to the front door of Hazelmoor, the house in Exampton where Captain Trevelyan now lives. When nobody answers the door, he fetches the local police and a doctor. They enter the house through the open study window at the back, and find Captain Trevelyan's dead body on the floor. Dr. Warren estimates the time of death at between 5 and 6 p.m. A fracture of the base of the skull is the cause of death. The weapon was a green baize tube. Captain Trevelyan's will states that, apart from £100 for his servant Evans, his property is to be equally divided among 4 people: his sister Jennifer Gardner, his nephew James Pearson, his niece Sylvia Deering, and his nephew Brian Pearson, the 3 children of his other, deceased sister. Each of these 4 will inherit approximately £20,000. James Pearson is arrested for murder because he was in Exampton at the time of the murder, trying unsuccessfully to get a loan from Captain Trevelyan. While the official investigation is led by Inspector Narracott, James Pearson's fiancée, Emily Trefusis, starts sleuthing herself. She is assisted by Charles Enderby, a Daily Wire journalist who, after the murder, presented a check for £5,000 to Major Burnaby for winning the newspaper's football competition in Exampton. Emily and Charles stay with Mr. and Mrs. Curtis in Sittaford, searching for clues. Mr. de Kers, James Pearson's solicitor, tells Emily that things look much worse than they already imagined. James has borrowed money from his firm to speculate in stocks. Without the knowledge of the firm, there are several red herrings. Brian Pearson came under suspicion when Enderby discovered him making a late-night rendezvous with Violet Willett. He is Violet's fiancé. He was not in Australia, but had returned to England on the same boat with the Willets. The Willets' motive for moving into the isolated Sittaford house had no connection with Captain Trevelyan. They wanted to live close to Dartmoor Prison, where Violet's father was imprisoned. His escape from the prison 3 days after the murder was engineered by Brian Pearson. He and Brian would live with the Willets as their manservants until the danger passed, but the prisoner was recaptured. Martin Deering created a false alibi because his wife Sylvia was watching him for divorce proceedings. Sylvia is Mr. Rycroft's niece, Jennifer Gardner is Mr. Garfield's godmother, and Mr. Duke is an ex-chief inspector. Emily solves the mystery in Hazelmoor after finding Captain Trevelyan's ski boots hidden in the chimney, and 2 pairs of skis in different sizes. Major Burnaby is the killer. He engineered the table movements during the séance to make the spirit convey the message that Captain Trevelyan had been murdered. Instead of walking the 6 miles in 2.5 hours after the séance, he went to his own house to put on skis, and skied the distance in about 10 minutes. He killed Captain Trevelyan at about 5:45. Then he cleaned his skis and put them in the cupboard. He hid Trevelyan's ski boots in the chimney to prevent the police seeing them, and thus possibly realizing how quickly a person on skis could have traveled between Sittaford and Exampton. Major Burnaby hoped that the second pair of skis, of a different size, would pass unnoticed. Mr. Rycroft, who is a member of the Psychical Research Society, reassembles 5 of the 6 original participants for a second séance at Sittaford House, the absent Mr. Duke being replaced by Brian Pearson. The séance has scarcely begun when Inspector Narracott steps in the company of Emily and Mr. Duke, and charges Major Burnaby with the murder of Captain Trevelyan. Emily explains that Burnaby had lost a lot of money by buying rotten shares. His motive for the murder was to keep the check for £5,000. He had received the letter notifying him of the win on the morning of the day of the murder, contrary to what he told Enderby. Captain Trevelyan had won the competition but used Burnaby's name to send in competition solutions. In the final chapter, Emily turns down a marriage proposal by Enderby, who has fallen in love with her during the investigation, because she still loves her